A series of new measures for Canadian industries most impacted by U.S. tariffs, including aluminum and steel sectors, were announced at a press conference Monday morning in Montreal.
U.S. steel and aluminum prices soared on Monday after President Donald Trump said he would double tariffs on the two metals to 50%, intensifying the global trade war.
Few people ever stop to think about aluminum. It's just there, in the car you drive, the soda can in your hand, the roof over your head. But when Washington pulled the trigger on a massive 50% tariff, this everyday metal became the center of a storm. Overnight, prices spiked, factories struggled, and households felt the squeeze.
The United States is the world's largest importer of raw aluminum, but the country lacks the capacity to produce enough aluminum to meet its own needs.
A couple decades ago, we had 30 aluminum smelters around the nation. Today we have 4.
What was meant to shield American industry instead set off one of the most dramatic trade crashes in modern history. And as the U.S. stumbled, Canada moved fast, investing billions, striking new deals, and quietly seizing control of the future of aluminum. This isn't just a tariff battle. It's the story of how one decision reshaped economies, rewrote trade rules, and left an entire nation wondering if it had just handed its future to its closest neighbor. The shock that no one saw coming. It began almost silently, the way storms sometimes do. One announcement from Washington, one line on a tariff bill, and then everything changed. 94% of American aluminum exports collapsed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Gone. Vanished. A freefall so severe that economists now rank it among the worst trade crashes in modern history. Prices exploded upward by more than 20% in weeks. Entire industries, from automakers to breweries, were gasping for air. Consumers, ordinary families just trying to get by, suddenly found themselves paying billions more each year just to keep cars running, keep food on the table, and yes, even to crack open a can of soda. And while the U.S. stumbled, its northern neighbor saw the opening. Canada wasted no time. It surged ahead with billion-dollar investments, locked in new global deals, and positioned itself as the steady hand in a chaotic market. That left a haunting question echoing across boardrooms and kitchen tables alike. Had America just handed over the future of its aluminum industry to Canada? To understand how we got here, we need to rewind. The move that set this all in motion came in 2024, when the Trump administration announced a sweeping 50% tariff on imported aluminum.
The Trump administration believes this problem can be solved with tariffs.
And I have also imposed a 25% tariff on foreign aluminum, copper, lumber, and steel.
It was marketed as patriotic, bold, a way to bring pride back to American metal. The idea was sold as simple math. Raise the cost of foreign aluminum, and suddenly, U.S. producers would be more competitive. Domestic companies would thrive, workers would win, and the country would finally stand tall on its own supply. But trade wars aren't fought with slogans, and this policy, this blunt hammer, unleashed consequences that no one in Washington seemed ready for. When protection turns into punishment. Within months, the U.S. Census Bureau reported something shocking. Prices on aluminum products had jumped 22%. On paper, that may look like a statistic, but in practice, it was a wrecking ball. For an economy already reeling from inflation, labor shortages, and fragile supply chains, this wasn't a bump in the road. It was a direct hit to the engine. Think about how deeply aluminum runs through modern life. It's not some luxury item you can skip if it gets too pricey. It's the skeleton of your car, the body of your soda can, the wiring in your home, the siding on your neighbor's roof. Aluminum is the invisible backbone of our economy. And when its price jumps by nearly a quarter, the ripple spreads everywhere. Manufacturers were among the first casualties. Auto plants in Michigan suddenly saw the cost of aluminum frames and body panels skyrocket. Packaging plants in Ohio, companies that churn out billions of aluminum cans each year.
raising the demand for cat food. Meanwhile, the demand for aluminum can products also jumped during the pandemic as alcohol consumption rose and local breweries shifted to to-go models.
Could no longer keep margins steady. They had two options, both brutal: absorb the losses and watch profits evaporate, or pass the costs to consumers and risk pricing themselves out of the market. Most chose survival, which meant raising prices. And that's when the pain spilled into everyday life. Suddenly, cars, appliances, and groceries were carrying a hidden price tag created not by demand, but by policy. The same soda you picked up last week now cost more. Not because sugar or flavoring had changed, but because the aluminum can was suddenly worth far more. The construction sector took the next hit. Aluminum is everywhere in building: windows, roofing, siding, gutters, even the wiring behind your walls. For small contractors, many already operating on razor-thin margins, a 22% spike in raw material costs was devastating. Bids for new homes or renovations became harder to price. Projects stalled. In some states, families who were finally starting to rebuild after years of slow growth suddenly saw their dreams slip out of reach. The irony couldn't have been sharper. This was supposed to be a shield, a tariff designed to protect U.S. jobs and companies. Yet, in practice, it was choking them instead. And it was small businesses that felt the blade most sharply. A family-owned shop that crafted aluminum doors, a neighborhood brewery ordering tens of thousands of cans each month. These weren't firms with billion-dollar cushions. These were businesses living month to month, already battling high energy bills and rising wages. For them, the tariff wasn't protection, it was punishment. Some scaled back production, others laid off staff, a few simply closed for good, unable to make the numbers work. And if you think that pain stayed confined to factories and warehouses, think again. The ripple touched every American household. That six-pack of soda, more expensive. The fender bender repair on your car, a bigger bill because aluminum parts now cost more. The roof you wanted to replace, postponed because quotes came back higher than your budget could handle. It wasn't always obvious, but behind every small price hike at the checkout, every unexpected bill from the repair shop, every stalled home project, there was the same story: a tariff reshaping the cost of life in America. And what made it worse was the timing. Households were already staggering under rising food and gas prices. Adding an aluminum tariff was like pouring fuel on a fire. Instead of delivering stability, the policy made life less predictable, more expensive, and more frustrating for the very people it claimed to help. The 50% tariff looked tough on paper, but in reality, it was like forcing everyday Americans to pay a hidden tax, one that showed up not in Washington headlines, but in grocery aisles and family budgets. And as America struggled, another storm was building just north of the border: Canada's counterpunch. Here's what Washington seemed to forget. Canada isn't a side player in aluminum. It's the backbone of the North American supply chain. More than 70% of the aluminum used in the U.S. comes from Canada. So when America thought it was squeezing foreign competitors, it was really squeezing its closest and most reliable supplier. And Canada wasn't about to sit still. The boldest response came from Quebec, the beating heart of Canada's aluminum industry. Aluminary Alouette, one of the largest producers on the continent, stunned the market with a $1.1 billion modernization project.
In March, the US also threatened to place additional tariffs on all goods coming from China, Mexico, and Canada, which means the many aluminum products consumed in the US could receive multiple stacked tariffs.
And this wasn't just a facelift. This was a leap forward. The project, powered by Hydro-Quebec's cheap and clean hydroelectric energy, promised to build state-of-the-art, energy-efficient facilities. Facilities designed not just to survive tariffs, but to lead the global market. While U.S. manufacturers were scrambling to cut costs and fight shortages, Canadian producers were upgrading, innovating, and expanding. Quebec's economy minister said it plainly: America depends on Canadian aluminum. The U.S. cannot meet its own demand. Tariffs may raise prices, but they won't change that fact. And the billion-dollar investment carried a second message: resilience. Instead of retreating under pressure, Canada doubled down on growth. Hydro-Quebec's renewable power gave them another edge. Canadian aluminum was not only competitively priced, but also cleaner, far cleaner, than most global alternatives. In a world where sustainability sells, that mattered. Suddenly, Canada wasn't just America's supplier. It was positioning itself as a global leader in green aluminum. And here's the uncomfortable truth for Washington. Even though tariffs made Canadian aluminum more expensive, the U.S. still needed it. Without that steady flow across the border, automakers, builders, and beverage companies simply couldn't function. Canada knew this. And rather than waiting for Washington to come around, it expanded its focus outward. It diversified, signing new trade deals and shipping to markets far beyond North America. It was a strategic shift, away from dependency on the U.S. and toward a stronger, more resilient global role. And that was the turning point. While the U.S. fought its own consumers and industries with tariffs, Canada invested, innovated, and built new partnerships. What started as a defensive reaction transformed into an offensive strategy, one that could secure its place as a world leader in aluminum for decades to come. For many observers, the message was clear. America may have launched a tariff war, but Canada was winning it. The ripple that turned into a wave. When the U.S. raised aluminum tariffs from 25% to 50%, the real pain didn't just stay in factories or government offices. It landed directly in the homes, wallets, and daily lives of ordinary Americans. The numbers told the story. Analysts estimated that U.S. households were collectively paying an extra $2.5 billion each year because of aluminum costs. $2.5 billion. It wasn't just an abstract figure. It was hidden in the soda you drank, the car you drove, and the roof over your head. Take something as simple as a six-pack of soda. Aluminum cans make up a huge share of beverage packaging. When aluminum prices spiked, beverage companies weren't about to absorb those losses. They passed them down the chain. Families at the grocery store started noticing the difference. At first, just a few extra cents. But as weeks turned to months, those tiny increases piled up into billions nationwide. Cars told another painful story. Modern vehicles are built on aluminum, frames, panels, engines, even smaller components. With tariffs driving up material costs, automakers were squeezed from both sides. Sticker prices on new cars crept higher, while repair shops charged more for replacement parts. A fender bender that might have cost $900 suddenly stretched past $1,200. And for automakers already weighed down by chip shortages and supply disruptions, tariffs were like a lead weight pulling them under. Consumers felt it immediately. Fewer affordable options on the lot, and higher repair bills when things went wrong. Then came construction. Aluminum runs through nearly every building project. Windows, roofing, siding, electrical wiring. Contractors bidding on jobs had no choice but to raise prices. Small construction firms, already under pressure, were pushed to breaking point. Some clients delayed projects. Others canceled altogether. A family who once dreamed of a new addition to their home had to shelve the idea when quotes came back 25% higher. The slowdown rippled outward. Hardware suppliers sold less. Electricians lost contracts. Local banks financing renovation loans saw fewer applications. What started with tariffs on imported aluminum quickly grew into a chain reaction across entire communities. And the hardest hit of all? Small manufacturers. Imagine a local workshop that made aluminum doors, or a small plant that built kitchen appliances. Their customers weren't willing to pay more, but their raw materials cost more than ever. Margins that were already razor thin collapsed. Owners faced impossible choices: lay off workers, slash hours, or shut down entirely. The layoffs spread through towns like a virus. Paychecks disappeared, families cut spending, local shops lost customers. The aluminum tariff wasn't just reshaping trade policy, it was reshaping daily American life. What was meant to protect U.S. industries ended up squeezing them while households bore the hidden cost. The same policy that was sold as a patriotic safeguard became a silent tax draining billions from the public. And as America's consumers struggled, Canada was busy rewriting the rulebook. Canada's global playbook. While Washington fought its own reflection, Ottawa was looking outward. Canadian leaders knew they couldn't afford to wait around for America's next unpredictable policy move. So they drew up a new playbook, one that diversified Canada's role far beyond the U.S. The results came quickly. In early 2024, Canadian exports to non-U.S. markets jumped 18%. Meanwhile, shipments to the U.S. fell to their lowest levels since the pandemic. But here's the twist. Canada wasn't losing ground. It was gaining it elsewhere. Gold became one of the first big winners. Exports to the United Kingdom surged more than 30%. London investors were hungry for Canadian metals, not only for their value, but for their reliability. In a world where U.S. trade policy was increasingly unpredictable, Canadian metals came with transparency, stability, and trust. Buyers knew what they were getting, and that confidence was priceless. Energy told an even bigger story. Canada's crude oil exports to Singapore hit record highs, planting a flag in one of Asia's fastest-growing markets. For Singapore, it wasn't just about fuel. It was about sourcing energy that came without messy politics or unstable trade rules. Canada fit that bill perfectly. It's not just about money. It's about stability, about freedom, about building without constant interference or delays. And that's where the risk of brain drain becomes very real. When researchers leave, they don't just take their diplomas. They take their ideas, their patents, their potential to create industries that define the future. If enough of them head north, the U.S. could lose its strongest card, its innovative edge. In fields like green energy, biotechnology, and advanced manufacturing, losing that edge doesn't just mean slower growth. It means falling behind. And once you fall behind in industries that never stop evolving, catching up is almost impossible. The irony is brutal. What began as a tariff on aluminum has now spiraled into a threat to America's position as a leader in innovation. Canada isn't just selling metals or pork. It's actively working to attract the minds that will shape the next generation of clean fuels, medical breakthroughs, and advanced technologies. And if America keeps driving talent away while Canada rolls out the welcome mat, the future may not belong to the U.S. at all. So here we are. A single policy decision, a 50% tariff meant to shield America's aluminum industry, has unleashed consequences far beyond what anyone expected. Factories have suffered. Consumers have paid billions more. Small businesses have collapsed. Allies have been alienated. And perhaps most dangerous of all, the nation risks losing its brightest minds to a neighbor that saw opportunity in America's missteps. Canada, once seen as the junior partner in North American trade, has turned the tables. It invested, diversified, and modernized. It built trust abroad and welcomed innovation at home. And in the process, it showed that trade wars don't just punish rivals, they often punish the ones who start them. The U.S. now faces a stark reality. Tariffs may sound tough in speeches, but they don't erase the fundamental truth of globalization. No nation stands alone. And as for aluminum, the question that started this whole debate still hangs unanswered. Has America handed the future of its aluminum industry, and perhaps more, to Canada? That's where the story stands. But what do you think? Did Washington miscalculate? Did Canada outsmart its closest ally? Or is there still a way for the U.S. to reclaim its footing before the ripple effects grow even larger. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Europe followed the same path. Italy, for example, became a major buyer of Canadian aluminum and pharmaceuticals, and the appeal was obvious. Canada's billion-dollar modernization investments and reliance on hydroelectric power made its aluminum cleaner and greener than most competitors. As Europe pushed hard toward climate goals, Canadian metal was exactly what they needed. But it wasn't just raw materials. Canada's food exports soared too. Japan, famous for strict food standards, boosted its pork imports from Canada by 13%. Clean, traceable, and safe. Canadian pork carried a reputation that Japanese consumers trusted. For Tokyo, it wasn't about filling supermarket shelves. It was about securing reliability in an uncertain world. And that trust factor became Canada's sharpest weapon. Every deal signed wasn't just about tonnage or price. It was about reputation. While the US struggled with tariffs, uncertainty, and shrinking credibility, Canada presented itself as the stable partner, the reliable supplier, the safe bet. That strategy was more than defensive. It was transformative. Canada wasn't just keeping its head above water, it was thriving. It was proving that diversification wasn't just smart, it was essential. The US had tried to wall itself off with tariffs. Canada instead opened new doors, and with every partnership, every shipment, every contract signed, it expanded its influence and chipped away at America's trade dominance. For global buyers, the choice became simple: pay a little more for Canadian stability or gamble on US unpredictability. Increasingly, they chose Canada, and the longer this trend continued, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about aluminum anymore. It was about leadership. The brain drain risk. The final blow came not from factories or trade offices, but from something far more dangerous: talent. When Canada's Industry Minister Melanie Joly announced a 3-point response to US tariffs, she included the usual measures: stronger anti-dumping rules, liquidity boosts for key sectors. But then came the line that changed the conversation entirely: faster project approvals and new incentives for top researchers. For scientists, engineers, and innovators around the world, it wasn't just policy, it was an invitation. Canada promised to cut approval times from 5 years to just 2. On the surface, that may not sound dramatic. But in industries like biotech, clean energy, and advanced materials, time is everything. Delays can kill ideas before they ever make it to market. By removing red tape and speeding up approvals, Canada positioned itself as a place where innovation could thrive. Pair that with targeted incentives for researchers, and suddenly Canada wasn't just a competitor. It was becoming a magnet. And here's where the danger lies for America. For decades, the US has been the world's innovation hub. Silicon Valley, Boston's biotech corridor, the labs of MIT and Stanford, they weren't just centers of research. They were the engines of global progress. But in recent years, cracks have formed. Political battles, funding uncertainty, restrictions on academic freedom, the environment has grown less predictable, less welcoming. And for many brilliant minds, Canada's offer looks increasingly attractive.